Namaskar. The Markandeya Purana. Om Shakti Hrim Namah Shivaya Om Namo Narayanaya. The powerful sage Jaimini was Veda's disciple. One day Jaimini came to another very powerful sage known as Markandeya and said, I have come to you to understand the true essence of the Mahabharata. Isn't it true that Vishnu is the Lord of everything and therefore he has no form? How is it that he was born as a human Krishna? Why is it that Draupadi had to marry 5 Pandava brothers at the same time? Why did Draupadi's sons have to die in the dead of the night and not in the field of battle? Please tell me the answers to these things. Markandeya replied, I don't really have the time. I have my prayers to attend to. But I'm telling you the names of 4 birds who live in a valley in Mount Vindhya. Their names are Pingasha, Vivodha, Suputra and Sumukha, and they are the children of Drona. These birds know all the Shastra's sacred texts. Go and ask them and they will give you the answers. Jaimini was indeed surprised. Birds? He asked, how can birds know the answers to the questions? How can birds have the knowledge that is in Shastras? How can birds speak? Who are these birds and who is this Drona who was their father? Please tell me. And this what Markandeya told Jaimini. Many years ago, the sage Narada turned up in the garden that is known as Nandakanana. Indra was there, surrounded by many apsaras, dancers of heaven. As soon as Narada arrived, Indra and the apsaras stood up to honor him. Tell me, sage, said Indra, which apsara shall I instruct to dance for you? Whom do you prefer? Narada replied, I want an apsara who is beautiful and also has many good qualities. Which of you is both beautiful and good? At this all the apsaras began to clamor. I said one, I said another. Each of them insisted that she was both beautiful and possessed good qualities. Narada said, very well, then there is only one way to settle the issue. The sage Durvasa is performing tapasya, meditation on a mountain. Amongst you all, who is the one who can go and take his mind off his tapasya? That person will clearly be the best of the apsaras. Everyone was scared of Durvasa, so all the apsaras except one backed out and refused. The only one apsara who was prepared to take up the challenge was an apsara named Vapu. Vapu went to the Himalayas, where Rishi Durvasa was performing his tapasya. She did not go right up to the place where the sage was. Instead, she stood up a mile or so away and began to sing like a cuckoo bird. Hearing the song, Durvasa came there and saw Vapu. He immediately realized that the apsara had come there to take his mind off his tapasya. He therefore cursed her that she would be born as a bird and live as a bird for the 16 years. At the end of 16 years, she would be killed by a weapon and returned again to heaven. She would also have 4 sons. The king of the birds was Garuda. Amongst Garuda's descendants were 2 brothers, Kanka and Kandhara. One day Kanka went to Mount Kailasha. There he met a Rakshasa demon named Vidyut, who was a Kubera's servant. Vidyut was sitting there with his wife Madhanika and drinking wine. On seeing Kanka, Vidyut thought that the bird has come to disturb them, and he flew into a rage. He scouted the bird, and the bird replied back. A duel began between the two. As the outcome of this duel, Vidyut killed Kanka with his sword. This news reached Kanhara, and Kanhara wanted revenge for his brother's death. He came to Mount Kailasha and challenged the Rakshasa to a duel. Vidyut attacked with a black sword in his hands, and Kanhara fought with his back. When the bird broke the sword, the two began to wrestle, and Kanhara succeeded in killing Vidyut. Kanhara then married Madanika and brought her home with him. Since Madanika was a Rakshasa woman, she could easily adopt the form of a bird, which is what she did. The Apsara Vapu, who had been cursed by Durvasa, was born as their daughter Tarkshi. There was a Brahmana named Drona who married Tarkshi. Tarkshi went once to Kurukshetra when the great war between the Pandavas and Kauravas was going on. At that time, Kagadatta and Arjuna were fighting with each other. One of Arjuna's arrows hit Tarkshi in the stomach. She died, but 4 eggs fell out of her stomach onto the ground. King Bhagadatta's elephant was called Supratika, and Supratika had a big bell around his throat. At that precise moment, an arrow sliced off the bell, and the bell fell so as to cover the 4 eggs on the ground. Thus the eggs were protected until the end of the war. At the end of the war, a sage named Shamika came to the plains of Kurukshetra. He heard the sound of birds chirping from under the bell, and when he lifted the bell up, he discovered 4 baby birds sitting there. He brought them home to his ashrama hermitage and kept them in the safe place where they could not be eaten up by rats, mongooses or eagles. Slowly the birds began to grow, and within a month they had learned to fly. They roamed around the entire world, but always returned to the ashrama when they were tired. Because they associated with sage, they also began to pick up little bits of knowledge. One day they came to Shamika, bowed down before him and said, "We owe our lives to you. We also owe our wisdom to you. Please tell us what we should do now." Shamika was greatly surprised to hear the birds speak and realized that these were not ordinary birds. He demanded to know who these birds really were, and this is what the birds told him. Many years ago there was a sage named Sukrisha, and these birds were Sukrisha's sons. They served their father well. One day Indra adopted the form of a huge and old bird and arrived there. The bird said that it was very hungry and demanded to be fed. It also said that it would be satisfied only if it was given human meat to eat. Sukrisha called his son and asked them to offer themselves up to the bird as food, but the sons refused to do this. At this, Sukrisha lost his temper and cursed his sons that they would be born as birds. He then offered his own body to the bird as a food, but this Indra refused to accept and adopting his own form, begged Sukrisha's forgiveness for the trick that he had played on the sage. But the sons had been cursed. They bowed before their father and explained why they had refused. They had been too attached to their bodies. With strict knowledge, this attachment to the body goes. They therefore craved that in their next lives they might obtain the light of the true knowledge, and this blessing their father readily granted them. On hearing this story, Shamika instructed the birds to go and live on Mount Vindhya. Go and meet them there, Markandeya told Jaimini. When Jaimini went to Mount Vindhya, he heard the sound of birds chanting the Vedas. He met the birds and told them his doubts concerning the Mahabharata. The birds told him that many years ago, Tvashta's son, Trishira, hung himself upside down and performed tapasya. Scared of Trishira's tapasya, Indra killed Trishira. But this was the killing a Brahmana a sin, so Indra lost some of his energy. This lost energy entered the body of Dharma. Tvashta was greatly angry to learn of his son's death, and he tore off a hair from his head. He threw this into the fire, and from the fire there came out a tall and a fiery asura demon known as Vritra. Tvashta had created Vritra so that Vritra might destroy Indra. Indra was scared and he begged the Sapta Rishis, the 7 major Rishis, to intervene. The 7 Rishis managed to bring about friendship between Indra and Vritra. But Indra took advantage of this truce to catch Vritra unawares and so managed to kill him. This was a sin, and Indra again lost some of his energy. This lost energy entered the body of Vayu. Indra once again committed a sin when he pretended to be the sage Gautama and appeared before Ahalya. Yet again he lost some of his energy, and this lost energy entered the bodies of the 2 Ashvinis. When there was a lot of feather on earth and many asuras had been born on earth, the earth could not bear to carry the load any longer. She went to the assembly of the gods on Mount Sumeru and complained. She begged them to relieve her of the burden. To do the earth's bidding, the gods used their energy to be born on earth in different forms. Karma used the energy that he had received from Indra to give birth to Yudhishthira. Vayu used the energy received from Indra to give birth to Bhima. Arjuna was born of Indra's own energy, and the 2 Ashvinis used the energy they had received from Indra to give birth to Nakula and Sahadeva. Thus the 5 Pandavas were all born of Indra's energy. They were parts of a single whole, and Indra's wife Shakti was born as Draupadi. Thus it was that Draupadi had to marry all 5 of the Pandava brothers at the same time. The books continued with the story of Baladeva. When the fight between the Kauravas and the Pandavas was imminent, Baladeva was in a dilemma. He could not take the side of the Kauravas because he knew that Krishna was fond of Arjuna. He could not take the side of the Pandavas because Duryodhana was Baladeva's Shishya, student and son-in-law. So he decided to go off on a pilgrimage until such time as the war should be over. The night before his departure on the pilgrimage, Baladeva was in Dwaraka, drinking wine to his heart's content. Arm in arm with his beautiful wife Rivati, Baladeva wandered around the beautiful gardens that there were in the city. The gardens had exotic trees laden with flowers and fruits. The pleasant singing of birds could be heard. The lakes were full of lotuses and water birds. As he wandered around, Baladeva came to a place where the learned sage Suta was discussing on the Puranas to assembled sages like Kaushika, Bhargava, Bharadvaja and Gautama. All the sages other than Suta got up to honor Baladeva. This angered Baladeva, and since he was not quite in his sense, he killed Suta. This killing of a Brahmana was a sin, and to atone for it, Baladeva had to do penance, prayachitu, for 12 years. Many years ago in Treta Yuga there lived a righteous king named Harischandra. He did a lot of good work and he was also extremely handsome. When King Harischandra ruled the earth, there was no famine, illness or evil anywhere. One day the king went to hunt deer in a forest. He suddenly heard the voices of women shouting, "Save us, save us!" Forgetting his deer, Harischandra went off to see what the trouble was. As a matter of fact, the sage Visvamitra was meditating in the forest. Through very difficult tapasya, the sage was trying to acquire the different forms of knowledge, vidya, that no one had ever been able to acquire before. It was these different types of knowledge that had adopted the forms of women and were screaming, "Save us, save us!" Harischandra did not quite realize that these women were vidyas. He thought that they were real women and who were being attacked. To perform his duty as a king and protector, he took up his bow and arrow and threatened to shoot Visvamitra. Visvamitra became angry, and the moment the sage became angry, these different types of knowledge in the forms of women vanished from the skin. Harischandra now recognized Visvamitra and realized what he had done. He shook in fear like the leaf of a banyan tree. He fell at Visvamitra's feet and begged forgiveness. "Pardon me," he said. "It is the duty of every righteous king to donate, to protect and to fight." "I understand, king," replied Visvamitra, "but since you are so well versed in the ways of dharma, righteousness, tell me, to whom does one donate, whom does one protect, and with whom does one fight?" "One donates to holy men and to brahmanas," was the king's answer. "One protects those who are frightened, and one fights with one's enemies." "Very well then," said Visvamitra, "I am a brahmana, donate to me what I want." What would you like?" asked Harischandra. "Gold, jewels, sons, wives, leaves, kingdoms, cities, or something even more difficult to obtain. I want this whole world with its cities, villages, and mountains," said Visvamitra. "I want all the chariots, horses, and elephants. I want all the kingdoms. I want all the storehouses where you keep jewels. I want all your servants and your subjects. In short, I want everything other than you yourself, your wife, and your son. Give these things to me." "Given," replied Harischandra. "What about the jewelry and the clothes your wife and your son are wearing?" Asked Visvamitra, "Rightfully, they too belong to me. You can only wear the barks of trees for clothes. And since I do not want you in my territory, go to a place that is not under my ownership." Harischandra readily agreed to all this and prepared to leave, but Visvamitra stopped him. "You had performed a Rajasuya Yajna, royal sacrifice," said Visvamitra. "Where is the dakshina fee that is due to me for that?" "But sage," replied Harischandra, "I have nothing more to give. I have already given you everything that I had." "Even then," said Visvamitra, "you have to give me the dakshina." "All right," Harischandra said, "please give me a month. After a month I will come back and give you your dakshina." On this condition Visvamitra let Harischandra go. All the subjects were sad to see such a good king go, and they all did their best to restrain him. But Harischandra left the kingdom. Harishandra's wife was called Shavya. Shavya was walking a bit slowly, and Visvamitra, who had arrived on the scene, discovered this. So he beat Shavya on the back with a heavy stick. Without protest, Harischandra merely said, "Sage, where are you living?" But the five Vishvadevas gods were greatly saddened at this threaten that Visvamitra was handing out to Harischandra and Shaivya. They blotted out shame, shame, and the criticism injured Visvamitra. He curses the Vishvadevas that they would be born on earth as humans. When the Vishvadevas begged for mercy, Visvamitra told them that as humans they would not have any wives or children, and they would be free from the normal affliction that affect human beings. It was these five Vishvadevas who were born as the five sons of Draupadi. Also, Jaimini questions had been answered. Jaimini became impatient at the digression. "Tell me more about Harischandra," he said, and the both complied. Harischandra and the Shaivya had a small son who was called Rohitashva. They did not know where to go, since the whole world had been given to Visvamitra, and Visvamitra had asked them not to live in what was his domain. The city of Varanasi is regarded as not belonging to the earth or to humans, since Shiva himself created the city. So Harischandra, Shaivya and Rohitashva went to Varanasi. But as they were about to enter the city, they met Visvamitra standing at the gate. A month had been spent in their wanderings, and Visvamitra said, "King, where is my dakshina?" Harischandra replied, "Today is the last day of the month that you had granted me, but the day is not yet over. Give me till the end of the day, and I will give you your fee." To this Visvamitra agreed, promising to return later. But Harischandra did not know what to do. Where would he get the money for the fee? Shaivya said, "Husband, sell me and get the money." Hearing this, Harischandra fainted. When he regained consciousness, he realized that there was no other way out. Visvamitra's dakshina had to be paid, otherwise the sage would curse him. He therefore went to the marketplace and offered his wife up for sale. There was an old Brahmana who was watching all this, and this Brahmana said, "Sell her to me, I will buy your wife. I need a servant in any case, as my wife is unable to do the housework." Harischandra felt miserable, but there was no other way out. He accepted the money that the Brahmana gave him and prepared to say goodbye to his wife. Since Shaivya was now the Brahmana's servant, the Brahmana pulled and dragged her by the hair. Rohitashva would not, however, let his mother go and hung on to her clothes. As the Brahmana and Shaivya began to go away, he ran after them, crying, "Mother, mother, mother." Shaivya begged of the Brahmana, "Please buy my son also. Let me not be parted from my son. Otherwise I will not be able to do my work well. Buy me as a people buy a calf with a calf." Hearing this, the Brahmana bought Rohitashva also and gave Harischandra some more money. He then tied mother and son together and took them away. The weeping Harischandra was left alone. What a terrible fate had befallen a king of a solid dynasty. But there was not all the time to lament, since soon Visvamitra arrived and demanded his fee. Harischandra gave the sage all the money that he had got, but Visvamitra was disgusted at the small amount of money that Harischandra offered. "Is it all?" he asked in anger. "Do you insult me by offering me this trifle? Get ready for my curse." Harischandra restrained the sage. "This is all that I have got at the moment," he said. "I have got it by selling my wife and son. But a quarter of the day is still left. Come back then, and I will give you the remaining part of the dakshina." Visvamitra went away. Harischandra stood in the marketplace and began to shout, "Who is willing to buy me? Who needs a servant? Please buy me before sunset comes." Dharma himself arrived in the form of a man of a Chandala caste. His figure was rough and a bad smell came from his body. His face was not shaven and his teeth jutted out. His voice was rough. In one hand there were some dead birds and a skull, in the other there was a stick. A garland of skulls hung round the figure's neck. There was a crowd of dogs all around the Chandala, and his figure was such as to repel anybody. "I will buy you," the Chandala told Harischandra. "But my name is a Pravira, and I take care of all the dead bodies of the city." The proposition Harischandra found difficult to accept. How could a king born of the solid dynasty sell himself to Chandala? But Visvamitra arrived and insisted that Harischandra should sell himself to Chandala. The king fell at the sage's feet. "I am your slave, I will do anything that you ask me to. But please do not ask me to sell myself to an outcast." "If you are my slave," answered Visvamitra, "I can do with you as I will. I am selling you to this Chandala for a coin. Your debt to me states cancel it, but you are now the Chandala's slave." The Chandala paid Visvamitra the money. He tied Harischandra up and took the king to his own home. There Harischandra worked for the Chandala and lamented over what fate had brought him. After a few days, the outcast entrusted Harischandra with the duty of taking the clothes off of the dead bodies before they were burnt. 1/6 of whatever was obtained from a dead body was to be given to the king. Half would be the Chandalas, and Harischandra would be given 1/3 as his salary. This Mashana cremation ground was to the south of the city of Varanasi. Hundreds and hundreds of jackals were everywhere. Dark clouds of smoke rose up in the sky, and stinging skulls littered the ground. There was a place that was frequented by ghosts, demons, vultures, and dogs. The wailings of dead people's relatives could be heard, and the birds sat on the skeletons. Only the Chandals were happy. Even Yama would have been scared of this place, but this Mashana was where Harischandra was destined to be. His body took on a terrible appearance. He wore rags around his waist, and his body was smeared with ashes. He never found time to sleep. When Harischandra had spent 12 months in the Smashana, he dreamed that he would have to spend 12 years in that place before he realized. This so disturbed him that he lost all his sense. He forgot about his wife and son. Meanwhile, Rohitashva had died of a snake bite, and Shiva had brought the dead body to the Smashana. But because Harischandra had lost all his sense, he could not recognize his wife or his son, and the king's appearance had changed so much that Shiva could not recognize her husband either. But after a while they recognized each other and fell unconscious as the terrible fate that had befallen them. When they regained consciousness, they embraced each other and began to lament. Fate had given them too much to bear, and husband and wife resolved to enter a fire and kill themselves. However, before they could do this, Indra and the other gods arrived and restrained them. Dharma came, and so did Visvamitra. The gods said that Harishchandra's life had been such that he, his wife, and his son could now go to heaven, Svarga, in their own physical bodies. Indra poured the life-giving Amrita on Rohitashva's dead body, and Rohitashva became alive once again. Visvamitra also extended his hand of friendship. But Harischandra refused to go to heaven. My duty is to my subject, he said. I have to go back to the city of Kaushala to see how my subjects are. I cannot go to heaven unless they too go to heaven. If they go to hell, I will accompany them to hell. Indra said, King, how can all your subjects go to heaven? They each have their own individual punya, store of merit, and papa, sins to account for. Harischandra then offered to distribute among his subjects whatever punya he had earned. At this space Vihau Vimana arrived from heaven and took all the inhabitants of the kingdom of Ayodhya there. Rohitashva was made king in Harishchandra's place. Vasishka was Harishchandra's court priest. When Harischandra had lost his kingdom due to what Visvamitra had done, Vasishka had not been able to do anything because he had been away. He had been performing tapasya for 12 years under the water. But when he came back and learned what had happened, he cursed Visvamitra that Visvamitra would be born as a bird. Visvamitra also cursed Vasishka. Vasishka too would be born as a bird. Since both of them were powerful sages, both the curses came true and both of them were born as birds. These two birds were gigantic, and they began to have a fight in the sky. The mountains became dust as at the flapping of the wings. The earth began to shake, and a quake spouted forth streams of water. All living beings started to suffer. They began to run and cry to the gods for mercy. Brahma and the other gods arrived at the place where the fight was going on. Brahma asked the birds to stop, but they were in no mood to listen. So Brahma took away their bird-like forms and restored them to their original forms of sages. He told Vasishka that there was no reason to be angry with Visvamitra. It was because of what Visvamitra had done that Harischandra had attained heaven. The sages were ashamed. They gave up the fight and embraced each other. In the line of the Bhargavas, was once a Brahmana named Mahamati, who had a son named Sumati. Sumati never moved or spoke. One day Mahamati told his son, Sumati, serve your Guru and learn the knowledge of the Vedas. Then marry and have children. When your children have grown up, go to the forest. In the forest you will acquire Brahma Jnana, the perfect and supreme knowledge that gives bliss. Sumati did not reply, so that Mahamati kept repeating the advice. Eventually Sumati said, Father, that which you have asked me to do, I have already done several times. I have studied all the shastras. I can remember 10,000 of my early lives. I have had many fathers, several mothers, several friends, many enemies, and several wives. I have seen happiness and pain. I have suffered from all sorts of illness. I have been born as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, animals, worms, and birds. I have been rich and poor. I have killed and been killed. I have laughed and I have cried. I remember all these past lives. The supreme knowledge that you speak of is already well known to me. Why should I bother to study the Vedas? Mahamati was greatly surprised. Son, he said, how is it that my dumb son has suddenly begun to speak? Is it some sort of miracle? Tell me how you came to acquire this supreme knowledge. Tell me all that has happened to you before. Sumati then told his father about his early lives. Thanks to punyas that he had acquired, he was Jatismara, a person who remembers his early lives. He told his father that the righteous people who followed the path of Dharma always died happy. On the other hand, those who committed sins and lived the path of Dharma always died in pain. After the sinners died, the messengers of Yama, the god of death, came to take them away. The road to Yama's abode was a terrible one, frequented by hundreds of jackals and littered with stones and thorns. Flames raged in some places along the path. There were huge pits in the others. The sinners had to travel for 12 days along this road before they arrived in Yama's abode. Yama's ministers were known as Mrityu, Kala, and Antaka, and their eyes were a fiery red. Yama had several arms. He held a scepter and a noose. There are many hells, narakas, for different types of sinners. Liars and those who bore false witness went to the naraka known as Raurava. In this naraka, sinners were thrown onto burning coals when they were burned in agony. From Raurava naraka, sinners went to other narakas. After they had served their sentence in various hells, sinners were born first as birds, then as worms, insects, animals, mosquitoes, cows, horses, elephants, trees, and humans in that order. At first they were born as the lowest of the low among the humans, hunchbacked, ugly of appearance, dwarfs, and chandals. As the one acquired punya, one was successfully born as a Shudra, a Vaishya, a Kshatriya, and a Brahmana. But if one committed sins, one went in the reverse direction. Sumati then told Mahamati what happened to those who performed good acts. Wherever they went after death, Gandharva singers of heaven accompanied them and Apsaras danced around them. Vimans came for them and they spent their rewards in these women's, bedecked in divine garlands. When the period for their rewards was over, they were born again as kings and continued to be reborn depending on whether they had performed punya or papa, sins. Sumati had already told Mahamati about the naraka that is known as Raurava. But Mahamati wanted to know more about the other narakas, and Sumati described it to his father, the hells that are known as Maharaurava, Tamisra, Nikrintana, Apratishha, Asipatra, and Taptakumha. 7 lives ago, Sumati had been born as a Vaishya. He had prevented cows from drinking water at a well. Since this was a sin, after his death he had to spend time with other sinners in a naraka, which was full of flames. For 100 years Sumati was in that hell. One day a cool breeze wafted through the hell and brought relief to the sinners who were burning and thirsty. They were very surprised and looked around and found that Yama was leading a man into the hell. This man turned to Yama and asked, "Tell me, Yama, why have I been brought here? What is my sin? To the best of my knowledge, I have always followed the path of Dharma and have been a good king to the kingdom of Videha. What is my sin?" Yama replied, "Your sin is a small one. You had 2 wives, Pivari and Sushopkhana. Once Pivari had wanted you, but you had gone to Sushopkhana instead. This was your sin, and for this you had been brought to Naraka. You can now go and enjoy the fruits of your punya." But the king wanted to know why all these other sinners were suffering in hell. Why were crows tearing out their eyes? Why were they being boiled in oil? What were their sins? Yama's servant replied, "Each person had to get his reward or punishment in accordance with the punya or papa that he had done. Once the rewards of punya were enjoyed, the accrued stock of punya became zero. And once a sinner was punished for his papa, the accrued stock of papa also becomes zero. For small things there were small punishment, and for the major sins there were major punishments. For small punyas there was a small reward. For a lot of punya there was a lot of reward. Everything was strictly in proportions to what one had done with one's life. Those who looked at the people's property with the covetous eyes had their eyes torn out by birds. Those who spoke against the Shastra's sacred text or misinterpreted them had their tongues torn out by the birds. Those who brought strife among relatives and friends had their arms sliced off. Those who stole or caused unhappiness to others were thrown onto hot sands. Those who lied and their tongues sliced off with razors. Those who opposed their parents or their elders were thrown into garbage. Those who ate before their guests were satisfied were fed rubbish. Those who touched cows, brahmanas or cattle before cleaning themselves had their hands burnt in flames. Those who touched cows, fire, brahmans, elders or teachers with their feet had their legs tied with the iron chains and were thrown into the fire. Those who criticized the Guru, Devas, Brahmanas or the Vedas had iron nails inserted into their ears. Those who destroyed temples were skinned. Those who deserted their young children, servants, wives or friends in times of distress were fed their own meat. Those who stole had scorpions and worms let loose on them. Those who ate sweets alone without giving them to their servants or friends were forced to eat burning coals. A brahmana who takes money from a sinner is born as a donkey. A brahmana who acts as a priest for a sinner is born as a womb. A person who wishes to acquire someone else's property is born as a dog. Someone who insults his sister-in-law is born as a dove. A chief is born as a womb. A traitor is born as a fish. A stealer of food grains is born as a rat. If one eats food without first offering it to the gods, one is born as a crow. A stealer of someone else's food is born as a fly. A stealer of rice is born as a cat. A stealer of fish and meat is born as a crow. A stealer of oil is born as a cockroach. A stealer of fragrance is born as a mole. A stealer of wood is born as a termite. The king of Videha learned what he wished to learn from Yama's servant. The servant then said, "Come, let us live for Svarga." But all the sinners who were being tortured in Naraka cried out, "King, please don't leave us. While you are here, a cool breeze blows through Naraka and reduces our misery. Please don't go." At this the king of Videha refused to leave hell. Yama's servant tried to pursue him, but to no avail. Dharma and Indra also came and asked the king to leave for heaven, but the king refused. In fact, the king offered to give up his own punya so that the sinners might be rescued from hell. The sinners were accordingly released, and king of Videha was taken to heaven in a vimana for the wonderful act of mercy that he had performed. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayanaya, Klim Krishnaya.